I have had experiences in here where when people come here, and that's both the foreigners and Koreans, when they come in here, if it's just me and another non-person of color, they would automatically assume that the non-person of color is the owner. Yes, so there's a visa hurdle. There's a catch-22 where in order for you to register a business in Korea, you need to have...
Welcome to the Melanated Files. In this series, we highlight and share the stories of Black people from across the globe. Remember to subscribe to this channel for weekly videos and also follow us on social media for regular updates. Let's get into the interview.
My name is Fabienne Valmont. I'm an American citizen. I was born in Haiti. I came to the States when I was 13, and I grew up in Georgia. I came to Korea in 2017 on a break from my career and pursuing a PhD. The plan was to move to Norway, but I came to Korea for just a 6-month break until I heard from school in Norway, but I didn't get accepted to the PhD program I applied to in Norway. And while I was here, I decided to apply for school in South Korea and ended up staying here. I fell in love with Seoul. I think, especially like this part of Itaewon, I think I remember coming here. I lived in Wonju and the countryside, and I came here one weekend and came up the hill, and it reminded me a little bit of Europe for some reason. And I like the energy and I guess the vibe of the city. I currently run this art space called I Art Seoul space. Yeah, so I Art Seoul space is like, it's a physical platform for events, for organizing events. So it's like your WeWork for events. When I started my PhD in Seoul, I had a lot of downtime, and so I started playing with this blog about free things to do in Seoul, and the blog morphed into a website called I Art Seoul, which is a play on word for I Heart Seoul, and then I Art means I am Seoul. So the project was just basically to promote all things art and soul. And while I started promoting other people's events, a lot of people had asked me whether I was organizing these events. And one time I tried organizing an event, and it just took a lot of effort to find a venue and the cost and the organization. So I thought if I would organize events, I had to have like a permanent space. And then I started looking into a space that I could use as an art space, mostly to promote the kind of events that I enjoy doing that I don't necessarily find in the city, such as classic film nights, art classes, yoga. There's a lot of yoga classes in Seoul, but not in English for targeting foreign speaking people. So I thought I could expand on that. It's been great for the most part. It's liberating to be my own boss and to make my own hours. And I love not just like I love a lot of the things that I do here. Film night, sometimes only 1 or 2 people show up, but it's usually films that I enjoy. So a lot of the activities that I take on, I try to, find some meaning in them. So they're not just random things that I wouldn't necessarily do. So for me, this is more than a job. It's a lifestyle. So it's been great. It's mostly foreigners patronizing the spot. I think I would say 25% of our event goers are Korean, but in terms of patronizing financially, I would say it's mostly the foreigners. So I'm going 1 year at a time. So I actually put my PhD on hold after 1 year of doing it to focus on this. So I'm not really thinking about going back to the PhD here. but I would be open to pursuing it in Europe and Norway again if the opportunity opens up. As far as the space, the lease is for 1 year, so I'd like to give it at least 1 year to see how it goes. And at the end of, or close to the end of the year mark, I will evaluate and see whether there's a need for this space and whether I should keep going.
So if you get, like, I guess an offer from Norway, you're just going to drop everything and just go?
I may, but I may look into having a partner to continue running this space. I think that I do enjoy Korea, but it's like I guess a break from my journey. I feel like I still have to pursue what I set out when I left America, what I set out to do.
Okay, so this is something that just happened, right?
Correct.
This wasn't planned.
This wasn't planned at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes life does that.
Yes, in my inner self, there's a struggle.
I understand. What do you like the most about Korea?
What I like about Korea is the energy. I just feel like Korea is always on, and I'm always on. Like, I have a very active mind that it doesn't matter what I do, I can never tame it. And so I think I fit in well in the city that is always going. There's always something to do. There's always people to meet, people coming in and out, and it's very exciting.
What do you like the least?
The least, I think I would say the weather and the pollution.
What about food? What's your favorite Korean dish?
When it comes to when it comes to Korean food, I like the most basic thing. I think it's tteokbokki. It's just rice cake and a red sauce. It's my comfort food.
All right. What's the best life advice you've received overall, not just about Korea but in life?
I think it's usually be yourself. Everyone else is already taken, and I think that I've part of being here, even though I'm in my 30s, I'm still in a journey to find myself. And I think what I'm finding about myself right now is that I've always tried to be whatever everybody else wants me to be, to please everyone and not speak up. And so not speaking up has always been my problem. And so now I've becoming more outspoken and, setting boundaries. And so for that purpose, I think I would say I really needed to be myself more and say what I mean, say what I feel. And so I think that's the best advice I've ever been given and that I would give to other people.
It's more free.
Yes.
You can be authentically yourself, which is a really important thing. The next one is, what has your Black experience been like? Being a Black woman in Korea, what has that been like so far?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I get asked this question a lot, and I think it's because I've just been too busy to think about it, about that. And also because whenever I experience it, so I was born in Haiti, and then I migrated to the United States, and I've lived in 4 other countries, the Republic of Georgia, France, and then a few times, and then South Korea. And I've always tried not to ascribe everything that happens to me because of race, because I know people, for example, in France, they say people are very rude. So if people are being rude, are they being rude or are they being racist? So that's always a question, that I think a lot of people grapple with, but I try to just not think too much about the race factor and just think about people being who they are. So in Korea, I feel like a lot of my experiences as well, I usually don't ascribe them to race. I just ascribe them to cultural differences, or maybe like if somebody is not opening towards me, that it has to do with xenophobia versus, like they would treat any foreigners that way, not just me. But my experience as a minority has not been that, negative. I think even, after I entered the business world, I feel like a lot of people treat me with a lot of respect just because of my status as a business owner. I have had experiences in here where when people come here, and that's both the foreigners and Koreans, when they come in here, if it's just me and another non-person of color, they would automatically assume that the non-person of color is the owner. So that is one of the bigger issues that I deal with, that kind of profiling. I think it's probably maybe like the hair touching. Yeah, I've been in public transportation where people just reach to touch my hair, and or they'll touch my skin and start talking about how smooth it is. I don't know whether that's funny or not, but any funny stories?
What's your reaction when that happens?
My reaction?
Yes.
I think, I'm like, again, because I've lived in so many homogeneous, I know that's a contentious term, but homogeneous societies like Georgia, where, when I was in Georgia, all the kids would always, not Georgia the state, but the country, they would always touch my skin and then just try to see if it's dirty. So the general attitude toward Black people by Koreans?
Yes.
Maybe it's because I don't have enough Korean speaking friends to know. I don't really know the answer to that. I think that the only point of view I have about this is from Black people themselves. When I read on Brothers and Sisters of America, it seems like there seems to be a lot of ignorance towards Black people and towards, I guess, misconceptions. But for me personally, I haven't been at the end of those discriminations, so I really don't know how Koreans in general feel about us. I do know that at least a friend of mine from Daegu, Korean lady, she doesn't like Itaewon. Well, until she knew me, she didn't like Itaewon because she said there were too many foreigners. And then I told her, foreigners doesn't necessarily translate into being bad people. And I think she said she was just intimidated. But foreigners in Korea doesn't always just mean Black, it means any non-Korean. It's not a challenge because this is Itaewon. So in the main Itaewon street, there is a beauty supply store where you can get all beauty supply products. There's also an American-owned beauty supply store called Honey Hair, I believe, and you can order her products online. So it's really accessible to get product for Black hair. And then there are some African ladies who are in the area, in the neighborhood actually. So it's like a 20-minute walk for me to go and get my hair done. The biggest difference, I think, it's mentality, the way of thinking. So in the US, I think we are individualistic, and I say we are because I ascribe to that way of thinking. But in Korea, it's not so much that. I think people are individualistic too, but there's what's the word? I think the best word would be to say that they're a little bit more conformist, whereas people wear the same things, they drive the same cars, they all go to the same places. For example, if yesterday we had an event here with a large group of Koreans, so all of the Koreans passing by wanted to come in. Whereas typically, if there aren't anybody here, nobody wants to come in. So I think it's like I don't know if this is a negative term, but like a herd mentality, which is very different from the United States.
If you could change one thing in the world, what would it be?
I would, I guess I would say gender equality. I would make it so that women were an equal footing to men, so that there would be less sexual violence against women in the world. I just feel like that's one of the biggest problems in the world now, is the inequality between men and women. This is a tough choice because I normally don't have, like, I don't get stuck to celebrities or like people of, like I don't have, what do you call it? Role models, just because people, I think this is a very pessimistic point of view, but I feel like people always end up disappointing you in the end. I feel like the people we look up to often, like, we think they're like angels, and then, for example, Mother Teresa, and then we find out she was awful to people. Or what was the name of the Indian guy who Martin Luther King Jr. Gandhi, that he was racist, or that Martin Luther King Jr. himself, was unfaithful to his wife, or so, like, you always learning later that people are not who they seem to be. But in terms of, I would say role model, who would I want to have a sit down with? I think maybe Warren Buffett. So I think it's very interesting that the person I like to pick is, is a white person. Like, it's not necessarily to say that he's my role model, but I've read he didn't write a book, but someone wrote a book about him called Snowball, I think, and talked about, his beginning from his family had money, but from very, I guess, middle class to being the richest man in the world. My ambitions are not to become the richest woman in the world, but to be, financially secure. And his way of doing it is the more traditional ways, like by focusing on health insurance and, banking and different kind of investment things that people will always need.
What's your proudest accomplishment so far?
Proudest accomplishment. I feel like I was the first person in my family to graduate from high school, graduate with a bachelor's and then a master's, and I was going to be the first to obtain a PhD. I think that because Haitian people value education a lot, that's, from when I was little, I've always been pushed to go for education. I think I base accomplishment based on what my family values, and I think that's education. So I would say that's my biggest accomplishment. I learned many lessons. I think I'm constantly learning lessons about not being so naive and trusting. When I was younger, like I said, I've traveled the world a lot, lived in a few places, and my motto was, I depend on the kindness of strangers. So I did things like couch surfing, where I'd stay with strangers, or let homeless people come and stay with me. And now that I own the space, I'm struggling with a balance between, understanding that this is a for-profit business, and the need to give this space away to anybody and everybody for free anytime. So the lesson that I'm learning is that you have to look out for yourself. But I grew up with a community mindset, I guess. So it's very hard for me to break away from that, to go from wanting to just open up to the community to, it's a balance. Yeah. My earliest memory is of maybe like 2 years old when I was in Haiti. They have, like, for New Year's Eve, we always celebrate by cooking this soup called soup jumu. It's like this yellow soup. And I remember being so greedy and drinking the soup before it was served. And then my grandmother was like, did you drink the soup? And I was like, no, I didn't. And I had the whole thing over my clothes. But yeah. So memories of Haiti and being a little mischievous. Yeah, I think so. Do not lose yourself in the process of whatever you're doing. I watched this. Let me clarify, because I don't know if it makes sense. I watched this movie called The Hunger Games, and so they're getting sent to this game where they have to fight to the death. And one of the characters said, all I want to do is be myself at the end of this. And then the other character couldn't understand what that means, because they had to, to go and potentially killed other young people their age, and he just wanted to remain. So I guess he would take risks, he would be a survivor, but he would not do anything out of character. So I think in business sometimes, because we are struggling, we are hustling, sometimes we might do things out of character. So I want to remain true to myself at the end of this. One thing that I think that Korea does very well and that the world could learn from is education. And I say that with a caveat, because I think in terms of the infrastructure for education is really good. So like the school, I taught, I would say, at this elementary school for about 6 months while I was in transition. And they had access to a lot of things, like an English schools on, the books, movies, and well-stocked library. And so I just think that they have a lot of good ideas about how to set up the education. And I think they also do well in terms of testing. The only thing that I don't like about the education system is the analytical thinking as a person who's gone through it as a student, as a PhD student. So I think obviously I support a majority of how the education system is run, and of course that it's free and that it's accessible to everyone, and especially in the rural area where I was teaching. I didn't expect them to have access to that much technology and things, because in the United States, education is depending on where you live. Some counties have really good education depending on how wealthy it is, and then some that doesn't have that much funding doesn't have that good education. So I would say that Korea is doing well in that it's very equal. But of course, there could be some work with the teaching style, teaching methods. I think it would take like mindset change, because the professors are Korean. A lot of them are US educated, Ivy League, at least in the school that I went to, but they still thought the way the Korean curriculum demands for them to teach, which is to lecture and never allow for the student to have a point of view, to develop their own critical thinking. So I think that would take a cultural change for that to change, and maybe by I guess more exposure to international way of teaching, maybe including more international teachers. I would say Gojedo, it's in the south near Busan, and it's not Gojedo specifically that I think people should visit, but this island off of Gojedo, which is a natural reserve, I think. So it's a botanical garden. It has beautiful exotic flowers, and it's just a small island. Just I guess the whole purpose of it is being that botanical garden, and it's so beautiful and breathtaking. And I remember thinking about this experience, thinking I would love to get married here. So I would recommend for people to go there. I wish I knew the name, and I would recommend. But if you go to Goje, you would Goje Island. Ooh, dating is tough in Korea. I think you hear, so we have this thing called open mic, and sometimes people come and share stories, and we get a lot of stories about Tinder. I think Tinder in every country is for the one thing, but a lot of people go on there with the hope of maybe meeting the right person, just because it's so hard to meet people naturally these days everywhere. And then so it's even harder because, and people are looking for different kind of guys. Maybe some expat girls want to date specifically Korean men, or they prefer to date other foreigners like themselves. And so depending on who you're interested in dating, it can be very challenging.
In your experience?
I think in my experience, I'm particularly more interested in dating for other foreigners like myself. So I don't have any issues meeting other foreigners, especially in Itaewon. Or like I could just go to HBC at the bars, but even that is not the ideal location to meet people, because people are not as forthcoming. Yeah, I quite enjoy seeing a lot of Black people coming in to Korea. I just received an intern from the United States. Actually, she's a student, and she came to Korea with the choice of going to France or coming to Korea. I went to France for during my undergrad, and although I enjoyed that experience, I think that being in Korea at such an age, it will be an even bigger eye-opener for her. It will take her out of her shell. I think I would not discourage anybody from coming here just because of racism. Having lived in other countries, I know racism can be a lot tougher. And in Korea, it's definitely manageable if you can distinguish what is ignorance versus what is malicious kind of racism.
Okay, so you're saying racism does exist here?
I think that there's, not that I have experienced it, but I don't want to disqualify other people's experience. Does that make sense? Because I think, so one time I lived in France, and after I moved away from Paris, I was in the US and a group with people, and I thought, well, I didn't think the Parisians were that racist because I had so many Parisian friends. And then there was this Black man who said, well, you haven't been a Black man in France, So if you were a black man in France, you would understand the racism, because it was hard for me to rent a place. It was hard for me to go to clubs. It was hard for me being in an interracial relationship. Whereas as a black female, I didn't have any of these difficulties. I rented a place without a problem. I could get into any bars. You know, I was in an interracial dating relationship and nobody bat an eye. So my experience is different from everyone else's experience. So I've become more careful about how I talk about racism. Just because it doesn't apply to me doesn't mean it doesn't apply to other people. And I know that in Korea, people talk about racism and talk about it as something that's real. So that's why I said I think that there is racism in Korea. My advice for black people wanting to start a business in Korea would be to go for it. It's challenging, of course. It would be challenging in the United States. It's challenging here because of the language barrier factor. But there's a lot of support, and also if you are a go-getter, I think you can make it work because of the support that there is.
So are there any like hurdles or stuff that foreigners might run into?
Yes, so there's a visa hurdle. There's a catch-22 where in order for you to register a business in Korea, you need to have the right business visa. And then to get the right business visa, you either need to have a spouse, or you need to have money. And I think the financial cap now is $300,000 US. And so for a lot of people, that's not accessible. But for me, I was gonna say I found a loophole, but it's not exactly a loophole. It's just the scheme that the government has to lure or invite more technology savvy people into Korea. And so since I had a website and my business relies on technology, I decided to use the technology aspect of my business to get the visa. And it's called a startup visa, D84, and it's accessible as long as you go through the right steps, the educational portion of it, which took me 4 months. There is a financial aspect of it where you need to pay for lawyers to register the business. You need to pay for lawyers to help you get a patent for whatever technological aspect that you want to get a patent or the design for. So there's some financial costs that could deter people. But if you have a little bit of money set aside, you can definitely get it done. One common misconception about Korea is that it's still poor. Korea was really poor until about 30 years ago. But they've grown exponentially. I think now they could be considered the first world country. They have the fastest internet in the world, and they have a lot of access, great healthcare, as I mentioned before, good education system. So I think that there's a lot of people, expats, who come here thinking that they want to, save the South Koreans by either doing like an NGO or that their teaching will revolutionize things. But I think that there is a lot to take from here, more than to give, because I think they're already set. I think that one of the issues actually is the sexual assault situation, which I feel like maybe it's starting to get some limelight. There was a reason. Obviously, the Me Too movement started in the West and then it expanded here. But there were recent scandals about men taking inappropriate videos of females in public places and then sharing them with their friends. And there's been a lot of concerns even with the expat community that some of the men that they're involved with might have been doing similar to them. So I think there's definitely this inequality, gender inequality, where men think they can do whatever to women and get away with it, and there isn't that. The society is not upset about it enough.
How is your Korean?
It's non-existent. Yeah, I have my Korean is non-existent. I started when I was pursuing the PhD. I did about a semester worth of Korean studies, and I can read Korean and I can sound out the words, and if they are English words, then I understand them, obviously, but a lot of time I don't really understand the meaning behind the words. I can read them. I think, for what some people consider a risk might not be a risk for me. For example, to come to Korea, I gave up almost six-figure job. And so I think that's a huge risk, because right about now, I'm not earning any money. So, and I'm burning through my savings, and, maybe might go into debt. So I think that's a risk. So the advice that I would give to risk-averse person, I think I'm the worst person to give advice to risk-averse person, because I'm always gonna say go for it, because I feel like I've always taken a lot of risk. And I mentioned this was the second job that I gave up after I graduated college. I also had like a state government job, and it was right before the recession. Of course, I had no way of knowing that the recession was going to happen. But I quit that job as well to move to France. So I've always been taking risk in life, but I think that everything that I've done so far has been in education. So I would always tell people, just do it. And then another motto that I like is this too shall pass. So I feel like even if you go into a tough time, there's, rainbow at the end of the I don't know the sayings, but there's something positive on the other side. You just have to weather the storm and then wait till it passes, and then something better will come out of it. You will become a better person for it. So just do it, is my advice. I don't know, I think maybe resilience. My secret superpower, I don't really know. I would say resilience, because I feel like I have experienced quite a lot in life, but I'm still going. I still get up in the morning and, have the energy to keep going. Oh yes, people can find me on the internet by going to www.iartseoul.com or on Instagram at iartseoul.com, Facebook, Twitter, same handle. Or they can come to Itaewon, Noksapyeong, and we have a space right here at the corner of Noksapyeong.
Very nice. Anything else you'd like to share?
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to reach out to the Black community, and I know that my views are not always necessarily the most, I guess, shared views in the Black community, because people experience life differently, but hopefully you can take from it what you can, and then come to Korea and have your own experience.
Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to share your story or have us visit your region, send us a message on any of our social media platforms or via our website.
That's good.